Early in the morning, the first signs appeared over the Kremlin that an emergency announcement was being prepared in Moscow. Around 6 a.m., the Russian president's press office released a statement that instantly spread across global news outlets due to a direct threat to national security and the active militarization of Azerbaijan by NATO forces. Russia is forced to announce the start of a special military operation on the territory of Baku. These words shocked not only neighboring countries, but also the whole international community was watching. Within minutes, journalists started gathering in Red Square, and military correspondents set up live reports outside the Ministry of Defense. At first, the details of the operation were kept top secret. But soon, sources inside the military revealed that this wasn't just diplomatic pressure, it was a full-scale troop deployment heading south. According to aviation observers, several large transport planes were spotted flying over the Caucasus. Il-76 planes are flying toward military airfields near the border with Azerbaijan. At the same time, videos shot by locals in southern Russia started spreading on social media, showing columns of armored vehicles moving toward the border on platforms like Telegram. There were lots of reports about night convoys carrying tanks, armored vehicles, and missile launchers. When journalists asked Russian officials directly, they gave short answers. All measures are purely preventive. Meanwhile, morning in Baku started with some worrying news. The city's alert system went off with sirens, and the authorities urged people to stay calm and not panic. Patrols were stepped up on the main streets, and checkpoints popped up around key government buildings. Official Baku released a statement saying any military move that threatens Azerbaijan's territorial integrity will be met with strong resistance. The mood in the city quickly grew tense. In some areas, partial evacuations have started in some areas. Families with kids and elderly people were being moved to the suburbs away from potential conflict zones. Stores and pharmacies were packed with people stocking up on long-lasting food, water, and medicine. The situation got even more complicated when, almost at the same time as the Kremlin's announcement, news broke about large-scale NATO military exercises happening in Turkey and Georgia. Experts say the exercise scenario suspiciously matched what would happen if the alliance was preparing to deploy forces. Conflict in the South Caucasus. By midday, it was reported that the Russian General Staff held an emergency meeting with the Southern Military District Command. They discussed possible troop movements and ways to quickly neutralize targets that NATO might use in Baku, all behind closed doors. Meanwhile, officials in Moscow kept insisting that the operation is purely defensive and aimed at preventing threats, not seizing territory. In Baku, however, on the contrary, the rhetoric was getting tougher. The president of Azerbaijan made an urgent address to the nation, saying the country won't let anyone dictate terms. He accused Russia of aggression and demanded an immediate withdrawal of troops. According to him, any talks can only happen if Moscow completely abandons its use of force. At the same time, Turkey held an emergency briefing where a defense ministry spokesperson said Ankara is closely monitoring the situation and is ready to provide full support, providing necessary assistance to Azerbaijan in case of an armed conflict. The situation in the region kept getting worse. Long traffic jams formed on the roads, leading to Georgia and Iran, with cars flooding out of Azerbaijan's capital. The train stations were in complete chaos. Tickets to all destinations sold out within hours. By evening, it was clear that the diplomatic solution to the crisis wasn't in sight yet. Behind the scenes, at the UN, they were talking about the possibility of an emergency Security Council meeting. But with tensions flaring and both sides pointing fingers, the chances of a quick, peaceful resolution seemed slim. The world held its breath, waiting to see what the night might bring. Possibly even more worrying developments. Russia's defense ministry decided not to stick to brief statements and released the first official footage showing military gear being moved into the southern regions. The video, captured by drones and ground crews, showed long lines of T-90M tanks, modern armored personnel carriers, artillery units, and missile systems. Iskander missile systems moving toward the Caucasus. Trains carrying military supplies were being unloaded at railway stations, and there was increased helicopter and transport plane activity near airfields. In a statement accompanying the videos, the Defense Ministry emphasized that the operation's goal is to prevent NATO from setting up military infrastructure in Azerbaijan and to maintain strategic stability in the region. At the same time, Russian media were actively broadcasting reports from the southern borders, where correspondents, they talked about the mood of the military and showed off the power of the equipment. At the same time, secret talks were held in Moscow with allies from the CSTO. It's known that representatives from Armenia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan took part. The official agenda wasn't disclosed, but sources say they discussed coordinating possible actions if NATO tries to directly intervene in the conflict. Some experts believe Russia is trying to secure support, not just militarily, but also in the diplomatic arena. Efforts were being made to ease Western pressure. Meanwhile, Western countries were reacting strongly to the situation. NATO's Secretary General stated that any interference in Azerbaijan's affairs would be seen as an act of aggression against an alliance partner. Following that, armored vehicle convoys were spotted moving through Georgia and Turkey, and extra surveillance forces appeared along the Armenian-Azerbaijani border. NATO ship activity increased in the Black Sea, and the skies over Eastern Europe saw a heightened aerial presence. Recon planes have been spotted. In Baku, after learning about the redeployment of Russian troops, they quickly stepped up defenses. According to Azerbaijani media, artillery units, anti-aircraft systems, and mobile missile launchers are being moved to the frontline areas. City officials said they're ready to impose martial law if needed. At the same time, civil defense plans were put into action. Schools and government offices have partially switched to remote work, and underground parking garages and basements started being used, setting up shelter. The streets of Baku were eerily quiet these days, broken only by the sound of military helicopters flying overhead, Many shops and cafes had shut down, worried about possible unrest. Still, protests were happening downtown. Some people were demanding the government start talks with Russia immediately, while others for a tough response to defend the country's independence. By the evening of the third day of the crisis, social media started buzzing with reports that Russian military units were just a few dozen kilometers from the Azerbaijani border. This info sparked a new wave of worry among the people. At the same time, rumors started spreading about possible targeted strikes against NATO sites in Baku, which made the situation even tenser. On the fourth day, the conflict entered a new phase. Azerbaijani media reported hearing artillery fire in some areas near the border. Azerbaijan's defense ministry accused Russian forces of provocations and violating their airspace. The Russian side, in turn, said these were countermeasures in response to Azerbaijani units trying to get close to Russian troop positions. At the same time, a closed-door meeting took place in Baku between the Azerbaijani president and high-ranking military officials and intelligence representatives. According to media leaks, they discussed the possibility of directly asking Turkey for military help. Ankara, for its part, stepped up border patrols and put some of its armed forces on high alert. Meanwhile, in the Kremlin, over time, kept insisting that the conflict could be resolved peacefully. But a new statement from the Russian Foreign Ministry's spokesperson made it clear that Moscow isn't backing down until NATO drops its plans to set up military bases in the Caucasus. This ultimatum was tough and seen by many as a final warning. On the international stage, the situation caused serious concern. The UN Security Council held an emergency meeting, but they couldn't reach a unanimous decision. No solution was reached. Russia and the Western countries were completely at odds. Meanwhile, forces kept gathering at the border, and everything pointed to the diplomatic window closing fast. That evening, footage surfaced showing large columns of military equipment moving toward Baku. Among them were modern electronic warfare systems and mobile air defense units. These images spread worldwide, becoming a symbol of the looming clash. Locals watching all this unfold, they realized there might be no turning back and that the night ahead would be tense and possibly decisive. In Baku, the morning of the fifth day of the crisis kicked off with massive protests. Thousands of people gathered on the city's main streets, some waving Azerbaijani flags, others holding signs calling for peace and an end to the military escalation. But there were also those in the crowd demanding an immediate and tough response to Russia's actions, believing that backing down now would mean losing sovereignty. Police and special forces were keeping watch. They were watching the situation cautiously, trying to prevent any chaos. That same day, an emergency meeting was held among Azerbaijan's government officials. The defense, foreign affairs, and intelligence ministers gave the president a briefing on the current situation. According to sources, talks with Moscow had basically hit a dead end. Every attempt to contact Russian diplomats and negotiate a temporary ceasefire was met with a firm response. All activities in the region must be stopped immediately. That was the condition. Baku saw it as unacceptable, viewing it as a direct diktat from the Kremlin. At the same time, Western media started publishing reports citing anonymous NATO sources, claiming the alliance was considering supplying Azerbaijan with defensive weapons. According to unconfirmed info, this included air defense systems, anti-tank complexes, and drones. These reports quickly spread across social media and ramped up tensions. In Moscow, they were taken as a sign that NATO was gearing up for direct intervention. By evening, reports came in about shootings in the border areas. A few Azerbaijani news channels said Russian units opened warning fire at unidentified drones approaching their positions. The Russian side confirmed the incident, saying the drones might have been part of a reconnaissance operation. At the same time, a new meeting took place in the Kremlin with the president and military leadership. According to leaks, they discussed the possibility of launching targeted strikes, operations to neutralize sites that, according to Russian intelligence, NATO might use in Baku. These included warehouses, communication centers, and airfields. Russian TV channels started gearing up public opinion, showing reports about the inevitability of tough measures. The sixth day of the conflict was probably the most intense. The morning kicked off with a statement from the Kremlin, broadcast by all the major TV channels and agencies. Russia will take decisive action if NATO doesn't back off from its plans. The deployment of Russian peacekeepers in the Caucasus. The time for peaceful talks is running out. These words came across as a direct ultimatum. In response, the president of Azerbaijan addressed the nation again. He accused Russia of aggression, said the country is ready to defend its borders by any means, and stressed that Azerbaijan's independence is non-negotiable. Moreover, he announced that negotiations are already underway with Turkey and several NATO countries about arms supplies and possible military support. Meanwhile, in the area, activity near the Azerbaijan-Russia border has noticeably ramped up. Witnesses reported Russian tanks and artillery moving into positions close to key strategic areas. There were also reports that electronic warfare systems had been deployed to the region, capable of disrupting communications and navigation over long distances. Meanwhile, Baku was tense. People were stockpiling water, fuel, and food. ATMs downtown ran dry, and gas stations, long lines formed. Many companies shut down temporarily, and schools closed for a while. Armed patrols were on duty in the subway and at train stations. That evening, videos started spreading on social media, showing large convoys of military vehicles heading toward Baku. The footage was shot from a car window. A long line of trucks with military plates, covered by armored personnel carriers, stretched into the distance while helicopters flew overhead. These clips sparked a huge uproar and fear among people. The international reaction was quick. The UN Security Council met again, but couldn't agree on a single solution. Western countries pushed for an immediate withdrawal of Russian troops. Moscow, on the other hand, demanded guarantees that there would be no NATO military facilities in Azerbaijan. The diplomatic standoff hit a dead end, and the world watched anxiously as the situation edged closer to a full-scale armed conflict. By the end of the day, according to several international reports, the military was ordered to be on full alert. This was the final sign that the coming night could be a turning point. Either a miraculous diplomatic solution will be found, or the world will wake up to a new war in the Caucasus.